Hello and welcome. Welcome to an interview on how to deliver sustainable climate-proof cities with smart infrastructure. My name is Kenneth Cukier. I'm a deputy executive editor at The Economist and the author of several books on technology and society. And I'm here today with Matthias Rebellius, a member of the managing board and the chief executive of smart infrastructure at Siemens. Hello, Matthias.
Hello, Ken, and hello, everybody out there.
Great. Now, most of today's infrastructure is dumb. It does what it wants to do, but it doesn't measure itself. It doesn't adapt to its environment. And the promise of smart infrastructure is that not only can it actually become much more effective, but it could actually help us with climate goals. What will it take to deploy smart infrastructure?
Ken, this is, of course, a very broad question. This is also why we dedicated one of our three main areas of Siemens to infrastructure and give it even the name of smart infrastructure. We have industry and we have mobility. All this ties into sustainable future and based on technology. We as Siemens, as a focused technology company, we, of course, try to bring our technology to life and develop a purpose. For my business, the purpose is make smart infrastructure, use smart infrastructure to make a sustainable infrastructure, which is exactly what we need. And so why aren't we, I'm sure we talk about why aren't we that far in on a global scale as we should be and as we could have been. And I think one major point is here also the lack of upfront investment. And the capex and opex fight that we are seeing, as well as perhaps in the past the technology is not being there, not being used, or not being supported by the society. I always say it's a combination of the industry, so the technologies, the politicians giving the right economical and political framework, but also each individual has to contribute as societies have.
Okay, so budgets are always constrained. That's just a fact of life. But before we talk about the obstacles and how to overcome them, because I'm sure there's a really interesting story there, typically smart infrastructure over the usage time costs less than dumb infrastructure. That's one of the reasons that it's smart, after all. But let me dive into the element of the technologies themselves. When we're talking about smart infrastructure, what do we mean by that?
Yeah, so how we define it is, of course, we have three main areas. One is of buildings, which contribute still 40% of the carbon emission, and lots of it is wasted. We all know that, but it's important. And within smart infrastructure, then, of course, we have the grid environment, which is undergoing, so the electrical grid, which is undergoing significant evolution or even revolution when it comes to the distributed energy resources and all of the outcome out of this, which is really having a big impact on the needs for grids. We'll talk about this more. And then this is where those things, the world come together. This is what we call the grid edge. At the grid edge, we see e-mobility, distributed energy, the renewable energy, buildings becoming prosumers and the like. So this is where the two worlds come together. So these are three main areas to focus on, to invest in, and to address a significant portion of a city's and a city environmental's carbon footprint. We talk about sustainable communities as well as the sustainable energy transition as being the pillars for smart infrastructure.
So where is it being done well? Can you point to an example of a company or a territory, a jurisdiction that says, hey, they get it. This is a beacon for the rest of us?
Yeah. So I would say there's many great examples, but there's not now one country or one region which did everything right, of course. But this goes through. Overall, this latest studies also in our new space race report, we see that 60% say that the digitalization is not being used to the purpose of decarbonization sufficiently. And the infrastructure is still one of the sectors which is lagging behind for many reasons and for many decades. But there's great examples. If we stick to the at the moment with the sectors that I have talked about before. So grid infrastructure, for example, one of the largest electrical power utilities in the United States, American Electric Power, is using our software, using a digital twin for the grid to making it more effective, simulating their network, including their network investments, which are huge at this time, as you can imagine, with the transition from central to decentral energy generation is continuing. The second is smart infrastructure needs smart buildings, like universities, Tampere University in Finland, for example, having 70% connected and reducing also having all of the, I think more than 60% of the service cores being deployed remotely. So this is making buildings smart, making them more autonomous, contributing to the decarbonization in a sense. And there are several examples. The most examples in the grid edge are related to, of course, e-mobility as a major trend we talk about most likely later, and also the distributed energy resources.
I'm really struck by the term that you introduced, prosumer, making buildings prosumers, not consumers of energy. Lay out your vision. What's needed to happen? What does that look like? Have you done the numbers in terms of how quickly a building can go from being a cost to a revenue driver of energy? Is that even possible?
It's possible that would require that would be then even a net negative building, depending on the size and then the type of building. This is possible, but if we would have already achieve a net zero buildings overall, and we have, this is possible, of course. Having not only solar technology, we have optimizing the supply with having decentralized renewable energy. But on the other side, it's also obvious that this equation won't work without a significant reduction of the demand. And that has been missed in many discussions in the past when we talk about net zero buildings or net zero infrastructure. If the demand is not being reduced significantly, then there's no chance to win. And how do you do this? With better use of the equipment, having less energy efficient or have more energy efficient equipment in the building, being only heat and cool where it's needed. That sounds simple, but this is where the waste is being generated these days. And if you do this, you can easily reduce the amount of energy being used in a building by 20 to 30%, and thus requiring also every kilowatt hour which is not needed does not be produced, so to say. And this is also part of the equation.
Now, the problem, the obstacle, as we talked about at the very beginning of deploying smart infrastructure, is that it requires a large cost up front and you only get the payback over a longer period of time. And it's really hard on companies' CapExes to manage that. How do you sell it other than showing the numbers and hoping for sort of an enlightened commercial approach and sustainable approach? How else can you sell that?
Yeah, the one is a pure capex to opex transition, where we have different models like power purchase agreements or energy performance contracting, which is not new, which is available since many decades. Or I would say we are also very active in that, and this is still, I think, one of the largest pillars of contributing to the downstream emission reduction from our customers. Also. By doing this, which means the investment into infrastructure is being financed by the outcome. So that is more the technical kind of way, and combined with an intelligent finance solution. Now digitalization comes into play. And this is where we are all used to X as a service. This is more than a buzzword. You can sell energy efficiency as a service. You can also sell energy as a service, sustainability as a service, or also safety and well-being, by the way, is a very important measure. For us, safety and well-being is also part of sustainability, especially in cities where stress is also a big burden to the entire society and to people. So having new business models being deployed on top of what I said before is very important. And then the technologies are there. The finance models are there. We just have to use them. And this starts with connecting, making buildings and infrastructure an IoT play, connecting it to the Internet of Things and making use of the data, turning data into value with technology with purpose, how we say.
If somebody wants to start, how can they begin? What I mean by that is the idea of sort of ripping up your, either constructing a new building with these with this in mind, or ripping up your existing physical plant and putting it all in for a 20 or 30-year time horizon of payback of lower OpEx, as you point out. For a lot of people, they just can't do it. And so they're looking for easy wins that don't cost a lot of money, but they can immediately see some sort of benefit. Where would you point them?
To Siemens, first of all, of course, and then we can
obviously the Siemens, but to what
we can
easy if somebody wants to sort of step up into this.
Sure. No, but it begins also, if you talk from a private home, of course, there's many simple things that can be done where you don't need a large consulting company or a huge project with Siemens or companies like us. But then it goes up to in the industrial customers, optimizing their plants and facilities around the globe in hundreds of locations, or large cities being either newly built, like in the Middle East and Neom, or in the Expo, where we are a premier partner and developed a blueprint for smart infrastructure and smart city just recently, and you can still visit it for 2 weeks, and then it will turn into a real smart city in the future. So what I wanted to say is there's, of course, optimizing demand and supply on a private home is like using a heat pump, solar, and having e-mobility being and a charge and a battery, all connected to an intelligent cloud-based system. And if you scale this up to a large industrial facility or shopping mall, an airport, of course, there's a need to plan better and have also then making the calculation, having energy consultants making the calculation of what is the demand and what is the supply at what time of the day, using artificial intelligence to predict the outcome, to predict the consumption, as well as the right solution. This is what we do from a typical campus or single building type solution up to entire cities.
What about the skills needed to manage the building? In the past, you needed a guy or a woman who needed to handle a wrench, to do the plumbing, someone who understood electricity. Now you need an AI engineer to manage your building. Please, we don't have a lot of time, but I would be interesting to find out if the skills of being a good building manager or a good infrastructure owner needs to change as well.
Absolutely. I think this is a very important transition. Also, we call it the strategic workforce transformation, also for companies like us and also our customers, by the way, in terms of what they have to have on site. There will always be someone having the skills of being a good mechanic or an electrical engineer and getting the things done which have to be done locally. But this amount will decrease. And it has to, because, you can optimize building an infrastructure much better if you go by scale. If you have data from hundreds of the same buildings and you see the behavior, you can have an algorithm running on it and then deploy the optimization on the spot in real time at the same time. It's much more effective, you can imagine, as if hundreds of mechanics try to do the same thing and everybody nevertheless does it a little different. Yeah? And also it deteriorates over time. So what has been called continuous commissioning is now continuous monitoring, adaptation, and optimization. This is a continuous, we call it the vicious circle, also of a digital twin of infrastructure, where the reality is constantly being compared to and with the virtual world, and each of the both improving each other. So in a nutshell, yes, workforce transformation is important. We will have more remote diagnostic and remote capabilities in our engineering centers running and optimizing buildings, yes. And also the same applies for the grid infrastructure, by the way.
Matthias, this is fantastic. You've got a new business, building as a service. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Sadly, that's all we have time for, but I thought it's a very enlightening conversation. So thank you. I appreciate the time. And so, Matthias, thank you. To our audience who's been attending, thank you for listening. There's more coming, so please stay with us. If you don't subscribe to The Economist, you should become one. So you can go to economist.com, subscriptions. And I'm Kenneth Cukier with The Economist. Thank you very much.